listening to Tonebender's Sound Design Podcast, presented by Sound Ideas. This is the show where we talk with the sonic artists behind our favorite films, games, and series. If summer has your next project heating up, Sound Ideas is making it easier to build up the library you'll need. During the Sound Ideas mid-year sale, you can save 50% on all proprietary items. From impacts and ambiances to vehicles, animals, machinery, production elements, and specialty effects, you can stock up on these professional sounds before your next deadline hits. Get ahead of the edit with sounds ready for any scene, transition, texture, and any surprise that may come your way. Shop the 50% off mid-year sale now at sound-ideas.com. Hello and welcome to Tonebenders. My name's Tim Muirhead and I will be your host today as we dig into Season 1 of the Apple Sci-Fi series Murderbot, which has recently been nominated for an Emmy in the category of Outstanding Sound Editing for a comedy or drama series half hour. I think every sound person listening hopes when they were starting out that they could tackle a new sci-fi property from scratch and do all the sonic world building of an unknown planet. My guest today rose to that challenge and hit a home run as the show has lots of fun challenges that they overcame. Let's meet the supervising sound editors from Murderbot. Tyler Whittam and Danielle McBride, it's great to have you on the show properly. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, Tim.
It's great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
I say properly because you were on Tonebenders briefly for a 2-minute little mini interview when you won the MPSE Golden Reel. I got to interview you backstage, right? Basically when you came off stage. So that was just a little mini interview. I'm really excited that today we get to really do a much deeper dive about Murderbot. Congratulations on the Emmy nomination. That's fantastic. To start off, maybe let's dive into how you're both supervising sound editors. How do you split up the duties on this show?
I can let Danielle speak to her side and I can speak to mine, but basically it's straight down the middle, dialogue and ADR for Danielle, and sound effects and design is on my side.
Exactly. They rarely meet, briefly collaborated on the voice treatment aspect of things, but otherwise pretty clear. Tyler handles the sound design and sound effects aspect of things, and I handle the dialogue and ADR. I have my supporting dialogue editor, Eve Correa-Guedes, who works with me. She submits her edit to me, and I combine that with my work and review it and send that to the mix stage. And then I believe Tyler does the same for his team.
And I've got Craig McClellan, who was helping me as a sound effects support editor. And part of, the supervisory role, I guess, is going through and putting your ears on it last before it goes to the mix stage. So you've got other editors who are sending you things, as well as, my stuff and design and creatures and weapons and spaceships and all that kind of stuff. And I'll give it a playthrough. Usually my last playthrough or last couple playthroughs have Foley in it, and I do a quick pass once I get everything from Foley to, we prep everything after that, make sure it's all, nothing's missing, everything's in sync, it's to the latest version. It sounds big and awesome and banging, and then we send it to the stage.
Danielle, this show has a very unique challenge with the dialogue because our main character is a robot, and there's kind of 3 states for this robot. There's under the helmet, there's when he's got the helmet down and just speaking to people, and then there is a ton of interior monologue going on. But the interior monologue sometimes interrupts his actual talking to the real world. So there has to be some way to tackle that so that the viewers or listeners, I guess, understand that. So how did you go about trying different things, and maybe how did you land where you landed for the finals?
This is the one place where the departments merged. We worked collaboratively within our team, but also with the mix team and the producers and directors to come up with how we were going to approach this. This is the first thing that we started working on because we understood right off the bat that this was going to be a massive undertaking. In fact, it was my first question that I had for our post-producer, Amanda Lencioni. When I started the show, I was a fan of the books. And my first question for her was, what are we doing with this internal monologue? How are we establishing this? It was really purely a post-production undertaking because even though there were some scratch tracks that Alexander Skarsgård had done while on set that they roughed the episodes to, we really didn't have it. They sent us episode 1. We didn't have any of that. What we got, my first thought was, we have a lot of work to do. We need to get first off, the performances, and then we have to figure out how they're going to interplay. Like, I started conceptually on this very early on, well before we actually started our full-time contract, was, twofold. How are we going to record this, and how is it going to sound? How are we going to have those different dialogue elements play against each other? Because massive credit to Amanda, she also saw this as a problem right away. So that's when we started using the temp that we had, which I will also say the really interesting thing about this was that the helmet stuff was actually, I'd say, about 60 to 70% recorded in helmet. So our sound recordist, Michael Lacroix, had a mic in helmet. We had a mix of that, plus the temp that Alex Skarsgård had done on his phone, even some wild tracks that the sound recordist had recorded. And they were like, hey, can you guys run tests on this stuff so that we can figure out how it's all going to work together once we actually have it together? Those first meetings were about that. It was like twofold, as I said. How are we going to record it, which was a whole other thing? What are we going to do with what we have? How are we going to treat that? And what was really neat about how Amanda approached this with us was she said, I want everybody, including dialogue, sound design, mix team, to sit down and give us some of their best efforts of like the different treatments that we can try that then I can present to the executive producers and see, what they think about this. So we all sat down.
How many versions did we do?
Oh gosh. I think we each did 5, and it was so interesting. This is one of my favorite parts because I am not a sound designer. I'm a type of dialogue editor that has only ever worked with dialogue and ADR. And Tyler, I don't think Tyler's ever worked with dialogue and ADR. He's only ever been a sound designer. And it was so neat to see what we both brought to the table in terms of how we were approaching this.
Yeah, Danielle's was very I could see her twitching a bit when she was making the dialogue a little dirty. And I'm like, because she's probably very, I would like to make this nice and pristine to get to the, but, and so hers was probably on the lighter approach. And then mine was very heavy handed, and it was super processed. And then I'm sure everyone's yeah, this is a little heavy, and I'm like, yeah, well, we can scale it back. But let's start here, It's a funny approach, 2 different people, 2 different mindsets,
I like how you put that together because I was trying to find a way to describe how we both approached it. And I think that was a very kind way for you to describe how I approached it versus how you approached it. And then we had Alexander Furman, our lead mixer, also put in her efforts. And then it became a sort of mini competition to see whose version was going to win out and be selected. And I will say, I was very happy to see that Tyler's treatment was the treatment that we ended up going with. And he can get into that a little bit more. But definitely it was something that we tried on different episodes and different sections using, as I said, all of this mix of temp, location, sound, trying to figure out what was going to work long term. One of the main episodes that we tested things on was the episode that we have submitted for the Emmys, episode 9, which is All Systems Red. That has a scene in it. He's talking to the Grey Chris people where he's communicating with everybody in different feeds, and also has his own internal voiceover that's happening as well. So all those different elements had to be tested and make sure that everything was going to work together. There was very much serious conversation about whether or not when he had the helmet down, whether the voice would be treated, whether we would be treating the voiceover, whether the comms would be treated. These conversations were very extensive about how we were going to approach this. And as I said, that was a scene that really stood out to Amanda that she had us test on because she knew coming down the line that was going to be the one where it was going to work or it wasn't going to work. And I will say, again, to credit Alex Furman, our lead mixer, she had to combine these different elements. And it was even more complicated. We were recording voiceover all over the world. We were in Stockholm, Copenhagen, New York, and LA. And it wasn't really linear. So she was on that episode, I can't remember specifically, but probably trying to integrate New York and LA ADR recordings, voiceover recordings, along with the production to make it all seamless. So it was a massive undertaking.
So these VO recordings all around the world are all with the same actor though, right? He's just traveling all over the place?
Yeah, it's all Alexander Skarsgård, and we did it with him. What we did do was we thought about it ahead of time, knowing that these studios are going to sound really different. We asked every studio to put a U87, but not everybody's U87 is going to sound like everybody else's U87, so we also had them put a boom mic on him, and then we also had a lav on him just to try and maximize the flexibility. And in different scenarios, the boom would be a better fit than the U-87. I don't think that we ever used the lav, but it was just there as a backup because we were just trying to make sure that there was a continuity between all of these international studios to try and make sure that you couldn't tell. And we really did record the voiceover in batches, because the interesting thing that was happening also through all of this was we would get something at, our first session was in Stockholm, and then we would put it together and we'd be like, oh, that's not working. So then we would go to Copenhagen and we record some stuff in Copenhagen. And that's when things, finally started to really work. But then once we had that, the episodes needed to be recut now that we had this voiceover. Because when you're working with comedy, everything's about timing. So it wasn't a matter of like, we have a locked episode, let's just fit in the voiceover. It was like, now we have this voiceover, how can we make it funnier? Well, to make it funnier, we need to recut it. So then they would recut the episode. And then they would put it all together and they'd look at that and they go, okay, I would really like to redo some of these lines. And so then we would go to New York. And then when we would record some lines and they're like, okay, well, this is great from Copenhagen and this is great from New York. But it's still not really working. So let's go to LA and record some stuff in LA. Okay, now we've got that. Now let's recut the episode to work with the stuff that we recorded in LA, but also keeping some of the Copenhagen stuff and some of the New York stuff. And at one point, they even threw a Stockholm line back in. So it was very much, everything was in flux. So along with the treatments and discovering those and figuring out what was going to work with that, the entire sort of synergy of the show was in flux well through until we got finished on the mixed stage, more so than anything that I've worked on before.
The show was made about 15 or 20 years too late for you, Danielle, because back then you would have had to fly to all these places to oversee all this. If only. Could have got a trip around the world on this show. I think it speaks a lot to the type of show that Murderbot is. Brand new sci-fi series with spaceships and laser guns, and we just spent the first 20 minutes talking about dialogue. I think that's really cool, and it shows that it's a really different series than what I thought it was going to be when I first sat down to start watching it when it came out. But Tyler, let's now talk about some of those cool sounds that you guys made. The main spaceship that we kind of see in the show, I guess maybe it's not a spaceship in the strictest sense because it just flies around the planet that it's on. It's called the Hopper within the context of the show.
Oh, the Hopper, yeah.
Do you want to talk about, it's this kind of flying bus with giant circular rings that somehow make it fly. Do you want to talk about how you figured out some kind of internal physics logic to design the sounds for?
That was like one of the very first things that I started to come up with some sounds for. I hadn't seen anything from the show, but I think I was on vacation and I got a call from the picture editor, John Korn, and he's like, it'd be great to have some stuff in the Avid. And I said, okay. And I said, do you have anything I can see? And he's like, well, I have some concept art. And I went, okay. So I said, well, I'll be back in a week. Send it to me and I'll start coming up with some sounds. So anyways, he sent me some pictures of it. And you're right. It was sort of like the oversized drone with like 4 propeller type things, but they weren't really propellers. They were described to me as a Dyson fan where it's like the bladeless kind of thing. There is some jet propulsion to it. So I was like, okay, well, we can use some jet propulsion, but they articulate the arms. You see them as it lands.
The giant rings, they kind of tilt.
The giant rings, yeah, articulate. I started building kind of upon some of that science behind it. And I just started building things like, startups, takeoffs, landing, idles, interiors, buys, that kind of stuff. I basically built, I'm going to say the assets for it, again, because I didn't have a picture. I just built most of it in Radium and SoundMiner using just a combination of recordings that I had, that ideas I thought I can manipulate this into a really high quality recording, shot at 192 and pitched way down and then ramping up the pitch to it and that kind of stuff. So I had everything from a chairlift starting up. It had this massive weight to it. And then when I pitched it way down, like on top of that, the whole thing started to like, boom, kind of like you hear it start to fire up. And then we had some jet elements to it. I've got some great recordings of some jet bike type thing.
Hey everybody, I'm jumping in here to remind you all that the Tonebenders listener field recording stories call for submissions is still on. To take part, send in a recording that you have captured that you really, really love, along with the story of why you love it so much. It can be a sound that took a lot of effort to record, or something that was just a glorious accident, a sound that is universally thought of as beautiful, or something that just has special meaning to you. It cannot even be the sound you were meaning to record. Also, everyone that participates will be entered into a draw to win one of two O-Mini high-sensitivity miniature omnidirectional microphone pairs from Chris Trevino. For full details on how to enter and to hear the listening field recording episodes from 2024 and 2025, go to tonebenderspodcast.com or click the link in this episode's description in your podcast app. Submissions close on August 15th, so let's hear what you got, everybody. I just love the idea of unknown technology, like what the thought process is of, well, this thing doesn't have any actual propellers. It's just these rings. What am I going to do? So I'm glad that they told you that you could use jet sounds, because that must have really helped.
I've done a lot of sci-fi. Somehow I've caught myself into some sci-fi in the last, 5-6 years. And I find the biggest thing to sort of, whether it draws inspiration or whether it's the truth or whether it's close to it, I'm almost always asking, like, well, what is the technology behind this? Like, what is how does it move? Is it the Earth's gravitational pull? Is it magnetic? Is it, jet-based? Is it propeller-based? All these things. And that goes for weapons too, but, we can get into that later. But yeah, I mean, particularly vehicles, that kind of stuff. Like almost always the showrunners or the writers who, if they're on the call, they're like, oh, let me get into this. Yeah. Like they love the science behind it, right? They're like, well, we were writing it, or, and they're like, oh, it's definitely this or whatever. Or if VFX is on the call, they'll be like, well, there's not going to be propellers or that's only going to be this. I'm like, oh, okay. So, and that helps with the building process. So I know what to reach for as far as elements. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to particularly grab a helicopter or a chopper because that's just going to feel too propeller based or something, And actually at one point, somebody was explaining it to me, I believe. The hopper was supposed to be like this oversized, like hummingbird type thing. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I happen to be up north at our family cottage, and we have a hummingbird feeder just outside, and I have a high-res Sanken CO100K, which records things at really high resolution. And so I just stuck it, I probably have a picture of it, but I stuck it right by the hummingbird feeder, and all day they were just coming in and out and zoom, zoom, and then pitched way down, and it was a really quick sort of envelope of the hummingbird buys, which resonated my entire room. It was just like, whoa, and it was really quick and then sped up. But that was sort of a lot of the buys and everything. Once it slowed down, it was like this big, long, resonating, hummingbird buy that came in and out on all the buys, which really gave it a little bit of life. You could kind of hear, it was tricky. You could kind of hear some of the clicking of it. So a lot of declick, trying to take out the clicks of the wings and that kind of stuff. And you were looking for this tonal thing that came through in a lot of the buys, which ended up giving a lot of life. Similar to some of the landings and stuff like that, there's just sort of a track in radium that got laid in that ended up being just another element to it, of just sort of like hummingbird fluttering and stuff like that. Just so helping the sort of hummingbird motif to it a little bit. I don't know how much you actually hear of it in the final mix of it all, but I knew it was there. And
this is like the kind of thing that we all, as sound people, love, when you can take something as small as a hummingbird and make it represent sonically this huge, flying ship. That's very cool. It's great to hear.
And to be clear, I don't always knock it out of the park with those kinds of things. It's just a lot of trial and error, and you're like, yeah, I don't know if this is really going to. And then sometimes you just well, what about this? Throw one last thing, and you're like, this is amazing. I should have started with this. Once we got visuals, the landings and all that kind of stuff, a lot of granular type sort of synth, tonal things that kind of manipulated as layers underneath, just again to help us feel, just to give it a little more life. It sci-fi'd it up a little bit. And then Chris and Paul, our showrunners and producers, writers, an important thing for them was that the hopper was, much like Murderbot, was sort of the secondhand thrifty version of things. So the Press Ox team, they're all kind of like hippies and they're fun-loving. They're not concerned with the Bentley Hopper version or whatever you want to equate it to. But there's parts of it, it's sort of the unsexy version of it all that we kind of like to have. And the Hopper goes through things through the whole season, right? It gets like banged up, all sorts of things. It's trying to land and then it's broken and they're trying to fix it. So there was a certain amount of like sputtering and kind of like making it unsexy again after I built this cool thing. I was like, oh, okay, we're going to make this a little bit jankier. And so there was some work that had to go into that too.
Danielle, this show is got a small cast. Most of the episodes only feature like 6 or 7 people. The final episode goes back to the corporation where there's more stuff. But I'm assuming that many of these episodes didn't need Loop Group. And is that something that you like? Because there's nowhere to hide things, when there's only 6 characters talking, everything's got to be pristine.
We had 4 episodes that required Loop Group. We worked with an LA-based Loop Group for that, led by Jason Harris, and they were great. It was my first time working with an LA group, so that I worked with a New York group, so I had some experience supervising sessions over Zoom like that. But, working with the LA team, that was great. In terms of the small cast, it was also an international cast. First season shot in Toronto, so we had some actors that were here in Toronto. And then we had actors that were in New York. And I think we ended up with one actor that was in LA. And then we just followed Alex Skarsgård wherever he happened to be, the cities that I mentioned. Rewatching episode 9, which I did today, I was really hearing the challenges that we had with the dialogue and exactly what you're saying. There's just not a lot of places to hide stuff, especially when they were in the hopper and the costumes were noisy. The tools are getting better to help clean out stuff. So, I took advantage of that. Kept the technical ADR down as low as we could keep it, just to keep the original performances, because, as I mentioned before, comedic timing, we didn't want to lose any of that. So, yeah, there were challenges that way. Pleased to say that we had very few technical calls per episode, probably realistically, definitely under 20, maybe under 10. So most of the ADR that we're doing were ad lines. So, and again, credit to our sound recordist that, we were able to keep as much of the stuff that we were able to keep. So hiding stuff, we just had Tyler's ambiances to hide things in, and I found Tyler's design very clean, with not a lot of extraneous noise, like everything was intentional. So I felt like that all worked really well. And it was just a matter of just trying to get that dialogue as clean as possible, so that it could be used and not have the noise interfere and take people out of the experience.
I paid her to say that.
Yeah.
Okay, when you get on there, you tell Tim and everybody who's listening how great. No, I'm kidding.
Well played. Tyler, to get back to sound effects, one of the kind of amazing creatures in the film is this giant 40-foot-long millipede with a head at both ends, which we don't actually realize immediately has a head at both ends. There's a comedic moment where, oh, there's another head. Do you want to talk about both the movements of it and the piercing screams that it does, how you approach those?
Actually, I didn't realize there was 2 heads for a long time too, and then I was like, "Oh, well, this changes things," because I kind of feel like we need to have like 2 voices, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, "Yeah, we do." And so then went back to the drawing board on that one. But yeah, I mean, we weren't sure if that was supposed to be like if we should call it the centipede, the sandworm. I think we ended up calling it the sandworm most of the time because it was sort of like that living under the dune, living under the ground type thing. But that was basically a whole smorgasbord of sounds. I mean, I can speak to the vocal stuff pretty quickly. Built those basically in 2 layers, like just a high and a low version. And I did it with Synaptic Morph, where you're basically blending different vocals together. It doesn't always yield like the best results right out of the gate. You kind of have to like move it around on the slider between like original sound and morph sound and somewhere in the middle and that kind of stuff. I ended up getting into a spot, so it was like a combination of, it was taking seal, lion, tiger, elephants, all sorts of different birds, that kind of stuff. A lot of the lower end animals with the growls and that kind of stuff gave it obviously the low end layer. And then actually part of the main player was This was a recording I had. It was, again, around that time because it was the fall and we were doing it when I'm not in front of my computer. As sound editors and designers, I'm sure Tim, you do this too. We're always listening for things. And as you're doing stuff in the real world and you're like, pushing the shopping cart and you hear the squeaky wiggly wheel, you go, wish I had my recorder right now. That's really great. I was out changing my winter tires as Canadians. As we do. I had this car jack and it was like running low on oil. And every time I'd pump it down, the entire street would echo with this giant screech. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. So I went out and grabbed my recorder and recorded it. That is peppered in as most of obviously it's pitch manipulated. It sort of follows the envelope of what I had with other birds and that kind of stuff. And then you add a ton of reverb to it and it kind of echoes it across the quarry that they're in. So then I built out the 2 layers and then I would record them out, kind of cut them in and see if I needed more and that kind of stuff. And then went back and then sort of manipulated it so that some of those things were replaced with like a higher pitched bird and animal and ended up creating the baby version. So I always called it the mama head and the baby head. There's a really great sort of comedic moment. The mama head goes under the ground first and then there's this last sort of baby scream of finality to it. Then I built that differently and kind of it was pretty funny. It was like, oh, there's the big mama and then the baby scream. And so that was sort of the vocals and that kind of stuff. But a big part of it too was just sort of the movement of it and trying to nail the size of it, the size and the weight and the way it moved. And it needed to sound kind of gross, but very threatening and intimidating and all this kind of stuff. And so I'm like, okay, well, you just start building upon, feet and things like that. I was finding it was feeling very artificial. And then what ended up happening was Foley artist John Elliott to come on early and do just a day on some of the creature stuff. So he did all the feet. He did 4 or 5 layers of just these big feet. Did it in sync because it's like a centipede. So it's I took all those, did a little bit of a quick, edit and cut perspectives and did some stuff to it. I took all those, crashed it down and brought it back into Radium. Just created it as every footstep as basically a MIDI trigger. So it would fire a footstep off in Radium every single time. And so I rebuilt those feet and they were just massive. Every foot was a small explosion and that kind of stuff and dirt, debris and that kind of stuff. And then every time a foot went off, it would fire one of those Radium feet off. So it was so then I printed a big stereo version of that, brought it in. It was fully in sync with what John had done, cut up all the perspectives and put it back in place and basically just added a huge layer of heft and weight to it. That's what's so great about Foley. It felt natural and it felt like this all lands now. And it's you're so grounded to it, but it just needed that extra layer of heft that you need from just recording. It needs a level of sort of processing, which, is why I'm here. And the last thing with them was called up John again. I said, oh man, this is so great. It's feeling great. The one thing it's missing, it's got this exoskeleton thing.
The scales kind of thing.
Yeah, and they sort of articulate as well in and out when it moves. I feel like there's a couple of really great moments where it kind of goes across the screen like this. It'd be really great to hear that sort of, as it moves. And Chris and Paul had said they're kind of these, almost it's body armor. It's almost like ceramic plates kind of thing. He did a whole pass on that and I pretty much untouched, just laid that up, used that, and it was great. And just pulled the whole thing together. So it's okay, now we got the feet, the movement of it and that kind of stuff. And then we've got the vocals and we add it all together and boom, we've got our sandworm. Of course, there was a whole other side to it, which if you've watched, you'll see it where we go inside. Murderbot gets swallowed and we're inside. And that was a whole challenge. What should it sound like inside a sandworm, And we had everything from, I think we ended up landing, do you recall, Danielle? I think we ended up landing on the sounds of whales inside. What would it be like to be inside a whale? Mm-hmm. And it was sloshy because it was gross. And it was trying to do we hear the vocals screaming outside or we just I ended up creating a different vocal that was entirely different as if it was hearing it being Murderbot, hearing it inside the sandworm and what it would sound like. So yeah, so there was a whole thing. It's just this one shot when we're inside. What do we have that sound like?
You have a scene in front of you of something that's completely not real and you could never record inside a giant centipede. And their references, well, make it sound like it's inside a whale. Also something you could never record.
I do have my inside whale recordings
course,
I could use. Yes, right. Yeah.
I found that Chris and Paul actually had some really interesting ideas and sort of what they conceptualized the sound should sound like, which I found surprising, like took us in surprising directions.
But that's like, sometimes that's for me, like it sparks this like, oh yeah, that'd be kind of cool. Like, what would that sound like? And then you're like kind of going through your recordings, like, does this sound like I'm inside like a whale? And like, how, or if not, are we close? And how can we make it? Like, what kind of reverbs can we use to make it feel like that? Yeah, so it sparks creativity. Or you get that, I'm not sure what that would sound like, but I'll leave it to you. And you're like, okay. Or this should be something we've never heard before. I'm like, okay, that's also something that I'll have to look into. And
no pressure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for talking to me today. It was great to spend a little bit more time with you. We're both in the same city. We got to make sure our paths cross more often.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for this.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
If summer has your next project heating up, Sound Ideas is making it easier to build up the library you'll need. During the Sound Ideas mid-year sale, you can save 50% on all proprietary items. From impacts and ambiances to vehicles, animals, machinery, production elements, and specialty effects, you can stock up on these professional sounds before your next deadline hits. Get ahead of the edit with sounds ready for any scene, transition, texture, and any surprise that may come your way. Shop the 50% off mid-year sale now at sound-ideas.com. Tonebenders is produced by me, Timothy Muirhead. Theme music is by Jim Guthrie. You can reach me via email through info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow Tonebenders on Instagram to stay on top of new episodes. If you like the show, you can help us out by spreading the word to your friends and colleagues. Or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click support.